All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Todd Browse. I'm your host for this evening. I'm here with Susan Shultz and Ashley Wilson, and we would like to welcome everyone to HBAP Startups. So let's get started. For those of you who are new to our startups group, we have a few announcements that Susan and I will do at the beginning of each meeting. We'll do some short networking breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together for our main event. So for the breakout rooms, just understand, folks, if you're new here, you're going to be in a breakout room shortly. And first off is our mission. We're here to help foster and fortify an innovation and entrepreneur community coming out of the Harvard Business Analytics program. And our goal is to help provide our members with the tools, knowledge, leadership, and confidence necessary to grow their businesses from the ground up. Susan.
And there are so many ways that you can get and stay in touch with us. So we have our website, we have our YouTube site for all the presentations that have got the permission of the presenters are posted up there. We have our newsletter, and you can see all this in the Slack or in the chat if you want to click on any of them. And if you are in HBAP, we have the Slack channel under entrepreneurship, where you can see announcements and things like that. And then, of course, bring a guest, or if you want to come talk about something or you have a question about something, let us know. And then if there's anything else that you might want to share with us, bring it up to Todd, me, and Ashley. And then just a reminder that, as I noted, as long as there's approval, these recordings are posted publicly on YouTube. And we have a lot of good speakers starting with tonight, but starting next week, we've got some cool stuff. So Todd is going to talk about how do we run these LLMs locally on our computers to kind of de-risk some stuff, like LLMs like DeepSeek. He's going to show us how to do that exactly. And then on February 26th, we are very lucky to have HBS professor and former entrepreneur, now turned venture capitalist, Jeff Busgang. And he's got a new book, I think it's his 5th book, talking about the experimentation machine. So continuing the conversation around experiments and de-risking your organization. So he is the co-founder and general partner at Flybridge Capital, that has about $1 billion under management, and then teaches at Harvard Business School as well. And Kelly Kimball is gracious enough to give us access and gift Jeff's latest book for people that sign up. And then on March 12th, Mike Salguero, who is the CEO of Butcher Box, and he's been on the forefront of the claims-based meat movement his entire career. So claims-based meat movement, for those of you that don't know what it is, like I didn't know what it was, is the trend of consumers wanting to buy meat that has specific claims like antibiotic-free, organic, or grass-fed. And so since he founded Butcher Box in 2015, he discovered that 100% grass-fed beef is really hard to find in the US. And so he built this company to become the leading direct-to-consumer meat brand by making this kind of meat more accessible to everybody and putting an emphasis on animal welfare, the environment, and supporting farmers and fishermen. So very cool. And he won an Entrepreneur of the Year National Award by Ernst & Young. So he's coming to speak with us, and then, which will be super cool. And then Todd is continuing his education of all of us with talking about agentic AI part 2. Hopefully most of you were able to attend part 1, which was a few weeks ago. And then in April, we have Nick Petsis, who's talking about his really cool way of linking strong oratory skills with analytics. And so he's formed a company that helps other companies do that. So that ought to be super cool.
Yeah, I will be working towards the de-education component. I have no intention of educating anybody. So, yeah. Sorry, Susan.
That's okay.
Keep going. Next slide?
Yeah, next slide.
Okay.
So one of the things you could hear in our mission is that we really want to create and have created with all of you this environment where people feel safe and it's inclusive. And so we're really focused on collaboration and confidentiality and trust of each other. And so just a reminder that all rights are reserved by the presenter. And as we give feedback and ask questions, we're really focused on giving positive reinforcement, positive comments, positive questions, because that actually works the best for presenters to get better and learn from what we're saying. And then just always a reminder, no personal recordings of this. And then as always, if there's something you want to talk about, conflict of interest, anything like that, Todd, Ashley, and I are here to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. And I've just completely screwed up my entire computer. So let me go over here. We're going to open up some breakout rooms, and I will see you all in about 5 minutes or so. Hopefully everyone has a breakout room. I think this will work. Put us back into recording mode. All right. So, thank you. I hope you all had fun in your breakout rooms. Just as a little reminder, this evening when you exit Zoom, you'll see a little survey pop up in your favorite web browser. Please fill out the survey. We're data analytics people. We like that. That feedback really helps us. So please do fill that out. And just another reminder, our recordings will be made public on our YouTube channel. And at the end, we will end the recording, and we will probably wind up sticking around and continuing the conversation for at least a couple of hours. So please feel free to stick around for some overtime. And now, without further ado, it is my honor to introduce tonight's speakers, Jeremy Kahn, Adolfo Perez-Duran, and Susan Shultz. I don't have like any long, fantastic bios for you guys, so I'm skipping over this, but I am really fascinated about tonight's topic. I will say that I disagree with the notion that we need to ever do customer discovery. I think Tom Eisenman's book on why startups fail, if you want your startup to fail, you do not need to do customer discovery. So I will stop speaking, and Susan, Jeremy, Adolfo, thank you all for putting this together. I'll be quiet and stop sharing. I'm not even sharing.
Awesome. So Steve is going to share what we're talking about tonight. All right. So let me give you a little background on this. So about, gosh, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, Todd and I spent a couple of sessions in startups talking about the power of customer discovery and experimentation, and why it's so important to de-risk your business, focusing on this. And so I am a complete advocate, having been through a painful story myself about why customer discovery is so good. And I will talk a little bit about that. And then Adolfo and Jeremy, and now Steve and Julio as well, also went through a very similar process, as they call it, a game changer on how they think, how they approach their business. And so we decided we wanted to take you through a little bit of how do you do this first, but then more importantly, the stories behind it, these case studies of what we did and what we learned, and why is it such a game changer for us. And then we'll have something at the end where we're going to ask your opinion about something, and we're going to ask your help for something as well. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so we'll do quick introductions here. So I'm Susan Shultz. I'm cohort 10 of HBAP. I have been in corporate America my entire life. The last 15 years were really global sales, leading global sales organizations, all geographies, all service lines for engineering, big engineering and construction companies. And then I got a wild hair and did HBAP and learned about AI and data, and started my current company, TeamStack.ai, as born a baby out of HBAP.
I'll go next. I'm Adolfo. I've background in math foundations of AI, so I'm very passionate about AI and doing AI right for the right causes. I've been in that career from Bell Labs to Cable Labs to AWS, but then I decided these companies are not doing what I would like to be doing. So I decided to start my own startup. And later on, I will have an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what that means and why this is important for this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Jeremy Kahn. I'm CEO of Western Technology Alliance, and I'm cohort 4 of HBAP, and see a lot of new and familiar faces here. So Western Technology Alliance is a technology firm specializing in custom enterprise solutions, and we mostly focus on environmental compliance and digital transformation and tailored software applications that help businesses streamline operations and drive efficiency. So we have decades of experience, and we deliver these solutions that are designed to meet the unique challenges of our clients. And I'm here with our CSO, Steve Galley, and CDO, Julio Zaldivar, who were key members in doing this client discovery process. So I'll let them take over.
Great. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Galley. I work for City of LA Department of Water and Power for a few decades, left there, and I've been with Western Technology Alliance for a couple of years now as their Chief Strategy Officer.
Julio, you're muted.
This is what I get for trying to spare you guys from dogs barking in the background. I apologize for that. My name is Julio. I am the CDO of WTA. I've been developing products, web products, applications, and sites for over 2 decades. I've been working with Jeremy for just about as long. And having built all of these applications and having had as many experiences as I've had, it kind of shocked me to realize that there was a better way. There was an easier way. And we're going to hopefully share that with you today. It really did change the way I work with my clients directly and gathering business requirements and delivering what they're actually expecting as opposed to what I think they want. So it's a good, very exciting way to approach development.
Thanks. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to take you through some thoughts about what sales is, why this whole customer discovery is so important. Then I'm going to tell you a little story about TeamStack and my aha moments. So when you think about sales, right, or growth, or whatever word you want to use for it, it boils down to that a customer is really just trying to find the easiest, best match between whatever they need to solve something, to fix something, or do something better in their company, and a supplier or provider solutions. And so, of course, there's who are the people, right? That's on the left-hand side. And then in the middle is all this stuff about, like, what is it that they're trying to solve? What is the barrier to them doing their jobs? Or what are the pain points that are really getting in their way? And then the reason why customer discovery is so important is because once you understand what those barriers are and those pain points from the customer perspective, not what we think they are, but what the customer actually tells us they are, then we can make a really super clear match from the features of whatever we're offering, a service, a product, whatever. We can also specify the very close and clear benefits to what our features are going to bring to solve those. And then we can tell the right proof stories as well. So it's all kind of contingent on us really understanding those barriers and pain points. And too often in sales, I think we've all done it, I know I've done it, is we decide that we know best what the customer wants, and we start off with, we have this to sell you, rather than doing the work to see what is it that's really getting in their way. And so that's what we're going to spend the next several minutes talking to you about, is what we did and then what we learned. Next. So a lot of the stuff that I'm showing is from Strategizer. So Strategizer is this awesome company that does work with giant corporations on how to not kill innovation within large corporations. But they also do work with startups and with innovators in small, medium, and large companies. And so they have these 4 categories of what do you really need to understand in order to bring a product or a service successfully to a market. So 4 areas: desirable. Do the customers want this? Feasible. Can we build it? Viable. Is this going to be a good business decision? And then adaptable. Is it really taking advantage of and understanding the external factors? And by the way, there is this amazing book you can see at the very bottom that's called Testing Business Ideas. Has a ton of really cool ideas on experiments to run, and you'll hear some of those in tonight's presentations, and different philosophies on how to do which experiments at which time. So highly recommended that you get that book. All right, and we're going to really focus today on that desirability component. Okay, next slide. So customer discovery, pretty simple. You start with a series of hypotheses. Once you understand your customer personas, you run a series of experiments, you get key insights, you rinse and repeat, and the whole time you are reducing the uncertainty and risk of whatever it is you're bringing to the market. It could be a new product, it could be a new service, it could be just an enhancement of an existing product or service. And so the 3 risks that experimentation and customer discovery really attack are, first of all, desirability, right? So the risk is customers are not interested. And you're going to hear a story about that, 2 stories about that tonight, where 2 of us started with not doing this and customers were not interested. And then feasibility risk about delivering, and then viability risk, like, do we have the right pricing? Is this really a big enough pain point that customers are really going to pay money and switch from whatever they're doing now and pay money for whatever product or service that you're doing? So that's the process in a nutshell. All right, next. And so the whole idea, right, is everything that we're doing is, and what we do for our jobs is fundamentally working to reduce that risk and uncertainty as we move along from an idea all the way to a viable and sustainable business. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Next. So one of the things that we learned in our startup was, we thought that every time you bring a new product or service or whatever to the market, you follow this S curve. It's super smooth. There's stuff in the beginning, and then you go up the curve and all is lovely and well, and you make a lot of money and your customers are super happy and all that stuff. Well, it turns out that there's this little circle here where, and many people call this the Valley of Despair, that very early on, until you actually know what your customers' pain points are and that your product or service can actually fix it, you're really not sure whether what you're doing is right. And so some people just kind of skip this and skip the experimentation, send out a product or service, and then figure out, oops, customers really don't want it, or, it's really not sustainable, or they're not really willing to pay money. So our whole focus here around customer discovery is moving through that valley of despair there through experimentation and testing quickly, smartly, with a lot of focus to get moving up that lovely S curve towards a viable, sustainable business. Next slide. So one of the things about thinking this way is we often, and our customers often, talk about features, like what they want. So when we listen to them about what are their barriers or pain points, they don't ever start by saying, I'm actually scared to death that I can't do my job. They'll start with something like, my suppliers suck and need to figure out how to make them be more consistent. And so what we want to do with customer discovery, and we'll show you how to do that, is getting at what's underneath that. What are the barriers underneath that feature that they're talking about, so that we can best match our solutions to that underlying pain point. So next slide. And so it turns out that there are about 7 big underlying barriers and pain points that pretty much all customers have 1 or 2 or 3. A few of them have even more. They have a lot of pain points, but they have 1 or 2 that we want to use customer discovery to really figure out what they are so that we can make that match, right? So here they are. So 1 is around time. 1 is around fear of that they can't actually deliver what it is they're supposed to deliver. 1 of it is around, do they have the right people? Do they have the right teams? Another one is around that they really don't have enough knowledge or experience or information. And then another one around growing their career. You know, are they on the right path? And then another one around budget, of course. And then the last one around reputational risk. So it could be their company's reputation or their entity's reputation, but it also could be about their own reputation around maybe they got a new boss and they have to prove themselves. And so you can see these are very different than kind of the features of I need, you know, I don't like my suppliers or I wish they could do better. This is what's underneath it all that we want to discover. Next slide. So just looking at it from a visual standpoint, right? They'll tell us something like, I want a single point of contact. But then if you really look underneath, what is going on underneath? These are actual words from an actual customer. One of them is time, that he didn't want to babysit his suppliers. Another one is he got a new boss and he's worried about having to prove himself. Another one is half of his team just quit. So these are common things that we know happen to all of our customers. And so we're going to show you a way to get at those underlying pain points so that we can match our features best to what they need. And one of the most magical questions to ask during customer discovery is why? So you say you want a single point of contact. Why is that? What could it solve for you if that were solved? All right, next slide. So here's a list. This is a standard list of customer discovery questions. We can send you this list if you want. But the main thing I want to point out is there's really 4 purposes of these questions. The first one is that you want to learn, what does this person, this customer, what are their goals and how do they measure success? Because you're going to match your features to whatever those are. And then you can see there's a whole bunch of questions around what are the barriers to them meeting those goals and meeting those success metrics? What are the specific barriers and how big are they? And what is their priority? Because you don't just want to find out what the barriers and pain points are. You want to find out if they're big enough that there's a market for your new or enhanced product or service, right? So every customer has pain points. That's, you know, they all do. We all do. We all have pain points and barriers, but we want to make sure that when we are putting something out in the market, that it's a big enough market, that it's a big enough pain point, that it's worth starting a business or enhancing a product or service. Makes sense. And then the next set of questions are around who are all the decision makers? Is it an ecosystem like B2B? You know, big ecosystems of decision makers in B2B. How many of them? How do we get to meet them? All of those kinds of things. And then last, of course, is always a call to action, which usually the best call to action in customer discovery is, can we have another call with you? We're going to find out some cool stuff. We're going to think about some cool stuff. Can we have another call with you? And you'll see later why that whole CTA of asking for the continued help is so important. Next. All right. So now I'm going to tell you our own story of depths of despair and how customer discovery really helped us get through that. So go to the next slide. So we answered that personal case in the very first class, Kareem's class of, you know, what's a big thorny problem that AI and data could solve, right? So we came up with this awesome platform. It's like for everybody. It's, you know, they can buy things here, they can sell things here, they can learn things, massive platform. went out to customers, and they were like, I'm being facetious here when I say, or I'm being kind of very positive when I say the reaction was muted. Like nobody cared at all. So then next slide. Next slide. Okay. So then we were fortunate enough to get into this discovery sprint with Strategizer, which was a 4-month-long sprint. 200 companies applied, 10 got in. Thank goodness one of them was us. So this is where we started. We started with all of these pain points from our perspective only of what should our product be built around. So this was our guess at our customers' pain points and barriers to meeting their goals. Okay, next. And then I want you to look at the middle graph first. So we did our very first experiment. We went through those 8 questions. You know, what do you need to do? How are you measured for success? What are your biggest barriers? Blah, blah, blah. Had our hypotheses, which 2 failed, and the 3rd one kind of was met. But so what they told us was, this was 20 different companies. They told us that lack of effective teams was their largest barrier to their success by a large volume compared to everybody else. So, right, all these other ones about lack of understanding, all of that kind of stuff. So it was all around lack of effective teams, which completely shocked and surprised us. Because if you remember that little circle, we had one little tiny box around teams, but everything else was around reducing cost or whatever. You know, we had 7 other pain points that were not relevant at all. So we did a total of 8 experiments. We defined the pain points around teams more deeply. We got a more prioritized set of features. We tested possible solutions in design workshops. We did that all in 4 months. And then we built our MVP based on that. But the other cool thing that happened is when we were doing this, we asked a lot of deep discovery questions around, like, what would it look like exactly? Like, what would the features look like exactly? And what we got back was all of this stuff around prediction, that they didn't just want to figure out how to manage the teams better. They wanted to be able to have early warning systems and predictors and solutions to make it better. And so that really told us that we needed to use AI and data. All right, next slide. And by the way, oh, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. So I also want to emphasize before you show you what we're doing now is all of that experimentation is, I am a domain expert in my field, engineering and construction. I've been in it my entire career. I'm, senior, I'm on boards, all that kind of stuff. Like, I am an awesome domain expert, and we got it completely wrong. Our first product. So that's why we wanted to have this night of sharing with you, like, why is this so important? So just to finish up with TeamStack. So we went from that platform that was everything to everybody that nobody cared about at all to now this. So TeamStack is unlocking team potential because every business's success is based on healthy teams. So that's what we're doing now. So next slide. So we link teams data directly to predicted performance and improvements in businesses. We have predictors, we have action plans, and we have scenario testing. Completely different from what we started with. Next slide. And so one last benefit of doing this customer discovery is that you build this community of people, these companies that start doing these experiments with you early on. We did 8 experiments with what ended up being about 60 companies. And so they have stayed with us. So we used 10 of those companies to test our MVP. Then we did 5 pilots. And now we have paying customers, that many of whom are from that original community that really helped us with our experiment. So this is an unexpected and wonderful benefit of doing customer discovery as well. Okay, so with that, Now we're going to go into the next case studies. And it's Adolfo, and you heard his background, but this is a really cool story because, and I'll tell you a little background. So this all came about because we were in startups and I got matched up with Adolfo in the breakout sessions, and he told me about this cool thing he had just completed. He got into this cool incubator, and I said, "What did you love best?" And he said, "Customer discovery." So I said, "Awesome, let's talk to the community about it." So here he is.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate that. So I'm going to tell you the story of how that experience of thinking in terms of the customer point of view changed not only the path of our startup, but also the way I approach conversations and I approach ideas now. So that's why we're going to be talking about the art of listening, and I'll try to do justice to what our customers told us. But before we go there, I think it's important to highlight and thank Susan for the effort of bringing us together and putting this conversation together, because fostering community and fostering, delivering value. The reason why I decided to do this is because I just wanted to give something to the community, and Susan has been helping us and bringing that to fruition, so to speak. So this is how it's going to go. I'm going to tell you about the problem that we're solving, our company, our startup, how we went about doing a customer discovery, and what that meant, not only for the product we want to bring to the market, but also for the way we're going to be doing the work. So next. So this is who we are. We help AI teams train better, faster models by delivering AI-ready remote sensing data at scale, on demand, and at low cost. What is remote sensing data? Let's figure that out. Next, please. So remote sensing data is any data about the Earth. You can always call it Earth observations, if that makes sense to you. That is normally collected by satellites, by drones, or by aircraft. All that raw data is collected and put into massive data storage, sometimes on the cloud, sometimes on the kind of their own agency servers, but typically everybody's moving to the cloud. So what we want to do is to harness remote sensing data to solve global challenges. Pick your global challenge: fire detection, food security, increase in insurance costs because of all the hazards that we're facing year after year after year. Whatever that is, the remote sensing data that is available to us has been proven to be helpful in addressing those global challenges. It's a great resource for research and innovation. And most importantly, the raw data, the raw version of those data sets is freely available. For example, there's more than 100 petabytes of data available in the Landsat program itself. But let's get going and understand who are we targeting and why. So next, please. We are targeting teams that are doing data curation, right? Anybody who's using data to create a model. And yes, we can agree that data will fuel the AI revolution. That's part of the story. The other half of the story is power, but data is a fundamental ingredient to what we're doing. But the reality is that for most teams, it's still a bottleneck. We spend a significant amount of time curating data. The process is normally manual. We still exchange Excel files, CSV files. It's slow and costly. And let me tell you a story of how slow this could be for researchers in the remote sensing space. I was talking to a professor that I was doing customer discovery with, and he told me the story how he had to ask his assistant to get on a bus, get down to a town south of Boulder, which is called Rock Creek, walk through the fields, walk to the open space, just to look at a structure. And he did that just for the purpose of validating pixels, a few pixels in a scene, in a satellite image. So the process is truly manual, it's slow, and it can be costly. Next, please. So we're going to help machine learning researchers, AI developers, and decision makers that are going to be benefiting from machine learning models, right? And we're going to be working on these people in academia and in research institutions. We're going to be targeting startups later. AI enterprises will be our next step. And finally, government and NGOs. All I'm going to tell you is related to academia and researchers. And that's because we want to start, we're going to penetrate the market in an incremental way because we're not that big yet. Next, please. So this is our journey. This cycle of customer discovery started when we were accepted into the TVX Boulder 2024. That's a high-tech startup incubator hosted by the city of Boulder. Among anything that you need to do in an incubator, financial model, your pitch deck, everything that normally comes with the menu of being an incubator, customer discovery was a key deliverable. So every meeting we have, every work session we had, you have to demonstrate that you were doing customer discovery, share your outcomes, your learnings, your insights. There were interesting questions such as, you ready to pivot? Did you learn something to pivot? So this was an integral part of the whole experience, and I'm happy that it was. So yeah, I went ahead and started, conducting the interviews, scheduling interviews, and everything that you will have to do to engage people to answer your questions. The problem was that I was dealing with people who are extremely busy. And yes, they will be open to talk to me. We will schedule the meeting and they will cancel. And as part of the process, right, the response rate should be like 3% in this. And so it was about there, but I was not moving as fast as I wanted. So I attended AGU 2024. AGU is the American Geophysical Union. And it has I think last time I saw the number is 300,000 members. So they had a meeting in DC and I was able to attend. There were 25,000 people there. Of course, not 25,000 people working in the remote sensing space, but I had access to hundreds of people, and I spent every day talking to people, conducted customer discovery. Some very formal, some less formal, some during sessions, some during breaks, and one of them a very productive session during a gala, right, at a dinner. So every opportunity I had to engage my customers, I was able to do it, and they were very open to tell me what pain points they were going through. Obviously, we gain a better understanding of what their pain points were, but most importantly, they helped us fine-tune what product we want to bring to the market. And we hope, and I think we're convinced after all this experience, that it will increase the impact we will have into solving these global challenges that I mentioned at the beginning. And next, please. So let me bring back this image that Susan already showed us, just to drive the point that we went through this process. At the beginning, we have all this enthusiasm, or this idealism, and yeah, we're going to take care of everything. And we know what needs to happen. I mean, we have great intuition. We've read hundreds of papers, so we should know what it is. But then as we started experimenting and talking to people, the pivoted started to show up, and the clarity of what is it that we really needed to do became more and more prevalent, and we started to understand really what we needed to be working on. So by all means, don't get in despair if you believe that your idea is going to be totally changed or you're going to be flat wrong. That is great progress. Next, please. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you 2 questions. Susan showed you a number of questions. There's a great field of discussion, and there is a great domain knowledge into what questions you can use. I will use 2 just to illustrate the work we went through. So the first one is a pretty simple question. We were asking folks, how do you or your peers are creating AI training data sets? Very simple question. I think, on the surface, right? And we approached it as an experiment. So we had a null hypothesis that says, if most researchers are already using fully automated pipelines to get their training data sets, but probably we don't have a problem. If we keep going with this, if we keep working on this space, it will be a nice hobby, but we won't have a problem. And certainly we won't have customers to maintain a company. If, on the other hand, the alternative hypothesis says, most researchers relying on manual processes, they have custom scripts and maybe semi-automatic workflows, there are inefficiencies, there are pain points, there are barriers, which are actually opportunities for us to bring automation into, right? So you get a lot out of a simple question of this, but it doesn't end there, right? Because the answers that we can extract from these conversations, can tell us that is there an opportunity to create a framework, to create some kind of standardized solution across different customer segments or different personas, right? But also we can uncover risks, right? If some of the customers already have a proprietary solution, an in-house solution, then more than likely will be resistant to pay for our service. That can also inform the go-to-market strategy that we're going to follow. So there's a lot of insights you can derive from simple conversations. Next one. This is very similar, and you can frame it in many different ways, but we decided to frame it in a way that it was easy for our customers to understand. What will be of value for them? What would they like to see? What features will they engage or they think they're missing, right? Again, null hypothesis is users prefer to maintain manual control of what they're doing. They don't want automation. Again, if they don't want automation in the creation of the data sets, probably we don't have a business. But if on the other hand, they express a desire for having some kind of help in creating data sets, maybe creating data sets in the cloud to interact with the frameworks, then you will have an opportunity to really add value. And again, there are insights from the business perspective you can derive that will help us prioritize feature development. Where should we put our time and resources? What's essential? What's nice to have? And also, we can uncover differentiators, right? We can put unique selling points in front of our customers that we can derive for these conversations. Next. So what are they saying? What are customers really telling about the problem they're having? This is a quote from a panel. There were multiple panels where people will come and discuss the problem over and over. This was a panel about data scarcity, specifically data scarcity for machine learning models. And what they're saying is it is important to develop approaches to address labeled data scarcity and train effective data models. If you read this carefully, you notice that what they really care about is to develop effective machine learning models, right? They're not saying we are in the business of labeling data. We're not in the business of solving data scarcity. We are in the business of doing research to produce the best possible machine learning models. So that was a great validation point for what we wanted to test, the hypothesis we were testing. Next. So what did we learn? And this are just a few of the things that we definitely didn't know, but we learned. We learned that data can drive research. The availability of a data set can shape the research questions that people are going to be working on. And the person who taught me this was so passionate about this problem that she's now my advisor. She's part of my board of advisors, right? I also learned from these discussions that radar is super important. So we were focusing on optical, what is called optical, stuff that produces images with color. But radar is super important because you can use satellites that capture radar data during the night. You don't need to be capturing data only when the sun is shining. Of course, many people are concerned about having a data scarcity crisis. And the problem is that even if they have data sets, and there's like 200 data sets that have been curated over the years, if you want to use that data set, which has data for North America, to make inferences about Africa, you're going to fail. You're going to need localized data. So they really need help creating the right data sets. Some surprising insights. Data set publishing and maintaining can give you academic prestige, right? In fact, one of the professors at Stanford that is maintaining the ImageNet dataset just won the prestigious Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering. And the reason is that she's been able to maintain this dataset. It's an important dataset used for computer vision. If you look behind the scenes for a moment, you learn that the dataset was put together using AWS Mechanical Turk, which tells you that that dataset was put together manually. And so the problems that I have been describing that people are facing today percolate even into award-winning data sets, right? Let's go to the next. So in terms of the company and the product, what did we learn? And I think this is super important because it's going to shift in our path, right? We started by having one single data source in mind, optical data collected by Landsat datasets, and a single use case, vegetation coverage. Tons of papers were published around this. There's tons of discussions about this problem. So of course, our conclusion was, all these people, they're not wrong. They're telling us this is a problem and it needs to be solved. Not quite. So we learned, for example, that the curation of real-time data is a key feature our platform will need. People who are working on risk mitigation, people who are doing weather prediction, people who are looking for flood, for example, any hazards that require really a quick response will require real-time data. Radar, as I mentioned, is super critical. Yes, optical data is cool, but radar is becoming super critical to the point that the Indian government and NASA have partnered to launch what is called NISAR, which is a very sophisticated SAR satellite with several bands. They will start collecting data like in 6 months, but it's going to be a tremendous amount of data, huge amounts of data that need to be processed and turned into AI-ready data sets. I mentioned that the available data sets can influence research questions, so that's super important, right? If I am a researcher and to start my research, I need to learn how to pilot a drone and get certified, that's probably going to slow me down. I would like to have a data set ready that I can use to do my work. And finally, agriculture is embracing AI and the intersection of AI and remote sensing. And the food scarcity problem, food safety problem is a problem that we all going to be feeling if we don't take action. And this is an opportunity we're going to be pursuing. Next, please. In terms of the customer needs and the barriers that Susan mentioned at the beginning, we encountered a lot of examples, a lot of matches. I'll mention a couple of them and let you perhaps look at the other ones. But let me start with the top, right? When the researchers say, we have a data scarcity problems, we want to focus on training effective machine learning models. But they're telling us, look, I don't have time to curate data. I don't have the right resources. I may be a geologist. I am not a data scientist, right? I need somebody to come and help me. And I'll skip down to the last one. As I mentioned, data set publishing can give you academic prestige, can also give you an international award. And prestige is important because you may be worried about your reputation, and you may be worried about your organization's reputation, right? Next. I will end by sharing with you what this experience changed at a personal level, right? I told you how it affected or how it benefited our company, but how did that change my perspective? One, it validated my desire to listen first and build second, right? Our customers are telling us what they need. Our job is to listen, not to assume that we know everything. It will help me have more confidence in the product we're working on. We know that we're solving a real problem, not just creating another product, right? And also, a startup requires focus and focusing on what you do, how you do, and how you really invest your resources. And so we are prioritizing what truly matters, making every effort count. And finally, I talked about impact. Our goal is to have an impact in solving these global challenges. If our product doesn't change the game, doesn't move the needle for our customers, we believe, and I believe, and I will argue, that is not worth launching. And that is the story about how this changed my perspective and our company's perspective. Thanks.
That was awesome, Adolfo. Thank you. Yeah, just wonderful. And really, the listening first and build second. Going to be interested to hear the questions. But before that, we're going to go to our third case study with WTA, Western Technology Alliance, and different group, different industry, but lots of learning for them as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I'll just set the stage quickly. But well, first of all, thanks for putting this together, Susan, and really guiding us in this process and bringing your seasoned perspective and illuminating the way on this. You're an awesome domain expert in this. So like I said, WTA, we're essentially an enterprise software solutions company. We have deep expertise in software analysis and architecture, systems engineering and development, and we work closely with a bunch of Fortune Global 500 companies. We serve a wide array of clients, including government agencies and utilities, healthcare, e-commerce, retail, finance, manufacturing. So quite a wide spectrum. And our core focus areas are in compliance and workflow and regulatory frameworks, data architecture, predictive analytics and AI-driven insights, and design and development of application and APIs and web platforms. And so historically, WTA operated as primarily a services-focused business. We have been good at securing long-term contracts and maintaining strong client retention, but now we're trying to transition from purely services to commercializing our domain expertise and proprietary tools. And our goal is to scale the business beyond custom development into IP and product ownership. And that can be risky. And so we tried to find a process that was key, and a few projects to test it with to help de-risk this process and focus on clients' pain points and what's driving the customer. And remember, our forte is in technology and delivery, but we wanted kind of a curated and meaningful process to gather requirements, needs, value propositions, and we wanted to increase the scale and traction of our opportunities and take advantage of those. So in this case, most importantly, we wanted data to be the guiding light because we're all data geeks. And so, it's paramount basically we see it as paramount to our competitiveness as we move forward. So in this case study that I'll talk about is, or Steve will talk about, a board of a leading compliance firm serving the biggest Fortune 500 companies, needed to assess their market gaps and unexploited opportunities for their product line. And they kind of believed that they knew their customers better than the customers knew themselves. So they invested millions into this platform and tools that went essentially unused. And the board was really frustrated, and the clients were frustrated. and they faced a lot of customer attrition. So we were brought in to help kind of identify, what the lowest hanging fruit would be and what they could capitalize. And the spoiler alert is we had kind of an epiphany. We changed how we thought about this process, and client engagement, the soft skills, and reading the client, and it changed our prioritization. So we can't imagine going back. And like Susan said, we use Strategizer. There's a lot of other solutions out there. There's like OGSM and OKR and Business Model Canvas, but Strategizer really spoke to us. And we wanted this structured, data-driven customer discovery process. I think Todd put the link in there, but we really loved this process. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Steve, who and Julio, if he wants to jump in, who spearheaded this project along with the rest of the team. And they really immersed themselves, and they delivered incredible results, and they learned so much along the way. So hopefully we could share a little bit of that. Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Piggybacking on the great presentations by both Susan and Adolfo, I'm excited to share this experience, how we successfully used the discovery process that Susan introduced to us. As an environmental manager responsible for software solutions, I wished I had this process decades ago. It would have saved me probably countless hours trying to figure out what does the customer want. And so I want to share with you the process we went through and how it works so well for us. So the process involves establishing hypotheses, then doing discovery interviews, feature definition and prioritization, and then design workshops. So we started with, as Susan mentioned, you establish hypotheses based upon your industry. Just so happened, we were hired to find a software solution for this company. So ours surrounded having to do with data and environmental compliance. And so we established three hypotheses that we thought kind of represented where we might want to find a solution in an offering. From there, we went into the discovery interviews. And Susan mentioned some of this already, but we set up 30-minute meetings. We had the set of questions to go through. We stuck to the script the best that we could. There was a few hiccups here and there, which naturally happen. And then at the end of the interview, we always asked for, is there any more customers, anybody else we can talk to? And I want to share with you how we actually took the data from those interviews and how they drove this whole process to the next step. So hopefully you guys can read this. It's a little small, trying to capture the whole spreadsheet here. But what we did is we took a lot of the data, as Susan mentioned, always ask at the beginning of the interview, can we record you? Can we record the video, the audio? And of course, we did AI transcription when we did that. So we had a transcript of the actual answers and conversation with the customers. We dumped it into an Excel spreadsheet. This is just a little snippet here. And then we had the three hypotheses that we wanted to figure out when they answered something, which one were they addressing? Hypothesis number 1, 2, or 3. And then to the right of that, you can see we have the seven big issues. There is an issue of time, fear, etc. And then so we categorize their responses into that as well. And after we went through all of the customers, kept dumping this data into the Excel spreadsheet, we then looked at the numbers and see what the numbers told us. So based on which hypothesis came out on top, hypothesis number one, only 3 people mentioned it, 3%. Number two, 12 mentions, 12%. And number 3 was 83 and 85%. So without even having any ideas of what they might say, I don't know that we would have guessed this, right? We might have said, oh, maybe it's a third of each. Who knows? After doing those interviews, tabulating all of that data that we had, we realized it was hypothesis number 3 that was a resounding dominant over the other ones. We also then categorized their responses, going through all the transcripts into these categories of the barriers. Which ones were at the top? Which ones were less important to them? And so just based on the customers that we interviewed, this is the results. Here again, I think we probably would have figured out time came out on top. Fear we won't deliver was the second one. You might think people's careers, like they want to advance. Nobody talked about their careers, right? So this is how those results came out. And then we also, as part of analyzing those interviews, we heard them say things that fit into kind of the feature categories, like what would this look like if you were to design a software solution? So we ended up with a list. I think there was 35 different kinds of things they mentioned. And then we just, again, tabulated that, looking at the customers. And then we took the top 7 feature categories and went on to our next experiment. So then we went into what's called a feature definition and prioritization process. And we used 2 different experiments for that. There's kind of a whole bunch that you can use. It's listed on the Strategizer website. You could see it there. But the first one we did was a card sort. So I mentioned those top 7. We took those, put those into a PowerPoint, got on a Zoom call with the customer and said, okay, help us prioritize these top 7 features that we could build for you. And so we put them on the left in no uncertain order. And then on the right-hand side, you could see how the customer prioritized them from number 1 through 7, number 1 being the most important. And then we had this kind of virtual pile of money. We said, we're going to give you a virtual $1,000. How would you spend that money if you could? And this is a real example of one of the customers, how they broke out that money. And it was interesting because it didn't always, you would figure they would go top, medium, lowest, right? 1, 2, 3. Sometimes they realized, oh, I put some on number 5 or whatever. But what this tells you, in addition to the priority, okay, most customers wanted, let's say, number 1, but how important was that number 1 to them? Was it equal as the others or much more important? So by them putting $500 of their $1,000 on number 1, we realized, it's information provided to us, that that is much more important than 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Which is also important. Then what we did is we analyzed all of the customer responses. This might be a little hard to see, but we have the 7 feature categories on the left, and we literally just plugged in the numbers. How much money did they put on number 1? How much on number 2? How much on number 3? And then we categorized it, and the results of this drove our top 2 feature categories. Then what we did is, from there, we said, okay, we now know that most of the customers that we engaged want these top 2 features. Let's build something for them. And so Julio and I got together. Julio's our UI, UIX expert. And so he laid out best industry practices, 2 sets of wireframes. And wireframes, if you're familiar, are not meant to look pretty. They're meant for functionality. So they don't have graphics. They're meant to kind of be plain, usually no colors. And so we put these together, and we got together with these customers again and showed it to them and said, hey, you were asking for predictions on equipment leaks. Here's what the screens look like. What do you think? What do you like? What don't you like? And then at the end of that, after they gave us all their input, we then said, okay, we're going to do a buy a feature again. You now have these two sets of screens. How about you tell us which one you would spend your money on? And so this is a little harder to read, but we took those transcripts again, dumped them into the spreadsheet, put them next to the screens, what they liked about the screen, what they didn't like. And then we had them buy which one was most important to them. The prediction screens came out with $20 and the report and data export was $180. So it was clear to see from us that if we're going to design something and spend the time, the effort, the money, we're going to design and develop a solution that they want. And it's not predictions, it's going to be report and data export. Challenges and benefits. Some discovery interviews strayed from the questions. We were kind of new to this. We got off on a tangent. It does happen. Overcoming antiquated ways of thinking. There's thinking that we had, thinking that they had, that it's difficult to overcome that. Realizing the customer kind of does really know best. Customer relationships weren't as good as they thought. They had all these customers, and so they realized, wow, our relationships weren't as good as we thought as we interacted with them. They weren't maybe as happy about some things. And so it was a challenge to get some further meetings because the customers were getting a little labored with the process. Some of the benefits, provides a formalized process to identify truly the customer's needs. It doesn't mean what we think they need, we let them tell us. When it comes time to build something and spend the time, the money, the effort, you're going to build something that the customer already has a need for. They're telling you their greatest barrier, you're finding the solution for the greatest barrier, and then you're going to build it and deliver it to them. You already have your customer right there. It also lets the customers feel heard and appreciated. And the customer we work for actually established a whole advisory committee with their clients, their customers, because they realized they got to foster that relationship. So that was a real benefit. Regarding the process, this whole discovery process, here's a couple comments we captured along the way. One customer said, the ability to predict the future, that would be awesome. Another said, this could be a game changer for me. Another said, this is a priority. And then lastly, we kind of laughed at this one, but they were very passionate about it. They said, are you kidding me? This is like winning the lottery. You could see the frustration, like they won the lottery, that we asked them what to build. We built it and we showed it to them. It was just amazing. So how did all this process change us as a company moving forward? Definitely completely changed how we think about gathering customer needs. It's going to be at the forefront of probably any project we work on. Historically, we were part of the equation. We felt like we've been doing this long enough. We know, but we realized that that bias was helping us from seeing the customer's real needs. We had no formal process, but now we do. And we'll definitely be incorporating this into everything we do kind of moving forward. So hopefully you guys take this with whatever you're going to do. It helped us tremendously. And so thank you for letting us share it.
Thank you so much. That was great, Steve. And can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So, a couple of takeaways here. So you heard 3 very different stories and different industries, different approaches, but all the same kind of passion, and that we've all completely changed the way that we think. And I think that the other piece of it that I want to reemphasize is we did 8 experiments in 4 months. Steve and Jeremy and Julio did theirs in 3.5 months. And I think they did a total of 7 experiments. Adolfo did his work in even much less time of that, and so much clarity of what they needed to do, what they needed to build versus what they thought they should build at the very beginning. So just an incredibly powerful process. So we have 2 questions for you. Some of you have said already that you would like more of a hands-on workshop or something like that. So what would be really helpful to us is if you could put in the chat just any of you that would like more, and what would it be? What it might it look like? That would be super helpful. And then the second thing is, you can see this is kind of Excel heavy. So we also have been talking, us and then a few other people that are really passionate about this process, about building some kind of simple product that takes advantage of LLMs, right? They can add a whole dimension of data around what might be the pain points that then we could continue to do the customer interview and customer discovery process, but in a very streamlined and much easier way of both analyzing, tallying, and reporting the insights and the data. So if any of you are interested in learning more or want to participate in this product, this group, we're also looking, of course, for people that we would like to interview to do customer discovery about, like, what would you like to see? What are your pain points that kind of were highlighted today in the process that we went over with you? So two asks. One is, would you like to see more? Would you like to have a hands-on workshop? Is there anything else that you'd like us or others to do? And then any of you that want to help us with this next project, put something in the chat. That would be awesome. And now we can do questions.
So yeah, folks, please raise your hands if you have any questions. Victor or Susan, you do this. But
No, that's good.
all right. Victor,
Yeah.
you're up, man.
Still me. So first, thanks to all the presenters. I picked up something from each and every presentation. My first question goes to Steve. I'm wondering, when you used what I think are referred to as low resolution wireframes as you described it, not a facsimile of a finished product that happens to be a prototype, but actually lines and shapes and abstracts of the solution. Did you find that people that you were presenting this to for their feedback made the connection between what a wireframe was expressing and what the final solution may look like, or was that a disconnect in the process?
That's a really good question. I think I'd like to hand this off to Julio. He is our designer who designed these and everything. Unmute yourself, Julio, and share your thoughts, because I think you'll say it much better than I would on that.
Yeah, again, I've been doing this for 20 years. When I first started, I always went for high fidelity renders with graphics and getting people excited. But I kept encountering the same problem, is the focus was in the wrong place. Everybody has an opinion about a font. Everybody has an opinion about a color or a logo. And when you don't understand a complex process or it's challenging, people gravitate to what's easier. So by removing all of that stuff, you basically have them focus exclusively on the function and the workflow that you're trying to determine. As long as you explain it clearly and say, this is not the finished product, but this is how we're going to build the product. These are the bones to the body. So if you start doing it in pieces like that, it makes a lot of sense, and people just kind of get into it because there's nothing else to look at. The focus is exclusively on workflow elements on there. Do we have the correct controls, the correct ways to engage with the data in front of you? That's where all of this is hammered out. Once I have their thumbs up on it, we'll usually produce a nicer version of that, a nice high resolution rendering of it. And if that looks great, then we'll do the final polished one. And by that time, there's really no fights, because the actual flow, the bones of the whole architecture, they've been determined way before any of the colors or the fancy fun stuff comes in play. Again, it's not easy always. I've been in many corporations and many companies. They want to jump straight to the colors. They want to jump straight to the end. And oftentimes you'll end up paying for it. You have to undo a whole bunch of stuff afterwards. And the part that's most important, the reason you're an application is to do something, not to look at it, but to do something. Mm-hmm. So as long as the focus is on that, how to do something efficiently and well, the rest of the stuff will come in much easier afterwards. Starting in reverse, you get a lot of buy-in for colors and look and all that. And then everybody's like, I hate this application. It doesn't work right. I can't get it to do what I want it to do because the focus is backwards. So yeah, just as long as you explain it as a process, as bones on the body that we're building right now, everything's okay. If you jump straight into it and they think this is what they're getting at the end of the day, that definitely as a designer would cause problems for me. But that's just a different phase as we move along in the process. Is that get the
Yes,
answer?
Julio, thanks for the insight. What I'm
Sure.
getting is that the hurdle of working with a wireframe is lower and easier to achieve than the hurdle of
Much.
pulling away from
Yes.
everybody becoming a graphics designer.
You're 100% on. And
Yeah.
again, I've
Yeah.
seen that for 20 years now,
Yeah,
and it's been
I've
pretty
seen
consistent.
both experiences, and I just was wondering what your
Yep.
insight was. The second question is for all the presenters. I know in traditional corporate environments where my background lies, there's always a cynicism among some, sometimes among all, about, oh, another used to be the phrase program of the month or program of the quarter. We're going to go through the exercise. Oh, it's called strategizer this time or something else next time. Let's just get through it so we can get back to work, right? And what I'm hearing is that when you went through the steps and largely stuck to the steps of the experiments and the discovery and the questioning and all of that, you somehow got buy-in to be able to
You
get
slow
to
down
the
to speed up.
result.
Yep. You slow down to speed up. You slow it down, you prepare, and then you go fast. If you don't prepare and you don't have that set up ahead of time, it's a different process. But yeah, you're 100%
But
on.
how do you, let's say in the beginning, how do you overcome the cynicism of maybe the few?
That's a great question. Depending on the project, depending on the need too, I usually start with the same thing everybody else has been talking about this whole hour is I start with the user, the end user, the person with a problem. And if you can solve the person with a problem, you have an advocate. You have somebody who's behind the solution that moves the needle much more than if it's just you providing a solution, hoping it's going to work. The more of a collaboration, the more involved they feel, the more heard they feel when they see wireframes, even though they're simple and they're just shapes, but they reflect the issues and the problems that they were expressing and solutions for them. It's a different score. You'll always have some guys around the corners, maybe naysayers and whatnot, which is why you build your coalition of users that really like what you're doing and are being answered. You focus on the problem, you focus on the users, and the other guys kind of come along as the solution
Yeah.
develops.
Yes.
And Victor, I think definitely being organized in the presentation of it to the customer that you're working for, to explain it, visuals, be organized about it. We really focused on that. So lots of updates, agendas. Here's the spreadsheet. Here's what they said. Here's what we have. So you have to kind of almost convert them along the way. One of the challenges I mentioned was the antiquated thinking, and you're right. That's what I kind of meant is that people are like, we've been doing software for 20 years. We
100
kind of know
years.
what the customer wants, right? And we're like, well, hang on. Let's see what the customer needs right now in this moment on this day. Given this environment and everything, let's find out. But it's a valid challenge and hurdle that you've got to be at. That's how I think we kind of did it was, I mean, by the end of it, we definitely made believers out of them.
Oh yeah,
Like I say, when the
absolutely.
customer says, and they're on the call and you're interacting with the customer and the customer says, oh my gosh, this is like winning the lottery. Like, what do you say to
Hit a
that?
nerve.
Like this is your job and you're
that happy
comparing
about
it to
it because
winning
you
the
were that
lottery.
moving.
So, but you got to be kind of faithful, I think, to the process.
Yep.
Document, show them the process is actually working along the way.
And I had one more thought, which is something I've done before. You will have some people that are much more interested in the design and the colors and all of that. Awesome. You don't say no. You say, that's step 2. I'm putting you down for step 2.
Yeah.
I'm hammering this part out, but the next step is exactly what you're talking about, and we're going to use you for this. So you don't have to necessarily say no, just not yet.
Great. Thank you both. Any other thoughts on that question?
The only thing I would say to add to it is, I mean, we've done this with, probably 60 companies now, and every single person, every single human had the same response, which was this startled delight that somebody actually wanted to hear what they had to say and what was getting in their way, rather than coming in and saying, this is what we have to sell to you. I mean, it was remarkable, that that response. And so that just told me, not just, learning about their barriers and pain points, but giving them this an option to actually be heard was so delightful to them. And I think, as I think back on that community, that still is, many of our paying customers, and helped us with all that testing and all that labor for free and all the data for free. I think it was because they were delighted, that somebody was actually listening.
Yep.
Yes, and that speaks volumes to the culture that you had to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you all for your answers.
Question. That's awesome.
And Ezra left a comment I see on the chat that I really like this a lot, because as we were kind of talking through this, Julio did a lot of it, dissecting through kind of the transcript part of it, a manual process. I think we can definitely automate that, right? To some level, right? Through AI or whatever. Because it's a very labor intensive process to go through and analyze every sentence, every word. What does that mean? How does it fit? So yeah, that's a really good comment that I think probably
capturing them on video,
will
super important. Super important. You get information you don't get on the transcripts. I mean, and the transcripts are vital, but the context comes with a lot more than that. I highly recommend it. And it also gives you an opportunity to focus really on what's being said and interact with the person, as opposed to just start taking notes furiously, which is the thing I did the first time I did the interview. I just kept trying to catch up, but my focus was on recording instead of interacting and listening. So the next time out, it was very much, I wasn't taking even notes, just one thing or another. And I worried about all the notes afterwards when I read the transcript and when I watched the video. My focus was exclusively on active listening and eliciting more questions. So, yeah.
So, Todd, you asked the question, right? How we can use agentic AI. And my scenario obviously is very different, right? I don't have a captive audience. There's a bunch of people out in the wild doing work. So, of course, I had a pipeline. Problem number one, who should I talk to? Who are the people doing the research in this specific area with this specific approach? That meant I have to read hundreds of research papers. So I would like to send an agent with certain parameters and said, go out there, research this area, give me a summary of the fundamental key authors that I need to talk to. Number two, I have to do this manually, right? But who are the influencers? Who are the decision makers? Because I need to talk not only to the folks who will use the data, but those who write the checks. I was like, same question. So send an agent out there, figure out who are the influencers and decision makers. Third question, who are the thought leaders? Who are people who can give an opinion, do an endorsement, and influence the rest of the community, right? And then, I mean, that, to me, if I want to have an agent, that will be value because he will obviously speed up the process. But if there's some accuracy in the work they do, it will help me really focus on what I can do well, which is talking to the right people, right? And then as this, some of the people are saying, once you have the data and the transcription and all that stuff, I mean, there's AI tools to listen into the conversation and give you a summary, right? But that's not agentic, that's regular stuff, right? But to your question, Todd, I want to see those agents doing deep research. Hope OpenAI will release them soon, so I can start using them.
You just have to. The deep research works. It's just $200 a month, and it's it's not their pro tier. Google's got theirs, which is a little less, and there's at least half a dozen open source that do the research. But again, those are about writing papers, academic research, less about customer discovery. So my question, where do you see this going? But I like what you're thinking. It's like, hey, go find me who are the market leaders, who are the influencers in this industry. Give me that list.
Yeah, that's half the battle, right?
Interesting.
That's half the battle. If you don't know who to talk, your questions could be the best, but you're going to be talking to the wrong people. That is a risk that you need to avoid.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Todd, I think part of the problem, so I don't think, agentic AI for this framework, this process is ready yet, and sentiment. It's really, we love to use technology wherever possible. So of course we integrate AI in many other ways. But here it's kind of a framework with soft skills, and you need to be able to kind of read the nuance and be very focused on what the client is saying and even how they're saying it. Facial expressions, these little cues that are very
Right.
hard to pick up
Yeah.
by
We're not there yet.
surveys.
I agree with that, Jeremy.
Yeah. So, but at a point, there might be certain integrated tools to help gather some of that stuff. I know sitting down with Susan, she helped us to really parse through what the clients were saying and focus on certain words and phrasing. You really have to retrain yourself, but that's where things are. Damage control. You're able to preempt getting into hot water because the process is being vetted by a reality check.
Yep.
And intuition.
Well, my concern with the intuition is that data destroys anyone's intuition, 99% of the time. So,
yes.
it's what all of you were just showing tonight. It is gathering that data and looking at it through the lens of hypothesis testing.
Yes.
If you're not doing that, you're doing something wrong.
Yep.
Which
Yeah.
again, hey, I'm all for destroying it. Just burn it all down. Fail. No, this is fantastic. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I'm curious about that agentic AI future for all of these human-related tasks.
Yep.
What would that agent need to do functionally and process, think? What are the different tasks that it would do? And once we, as the entrepreneurs start to oh, okay, this is what it needs to do, we can wrap this into an agentic pipeline. And when I go through this exercise, not only with my students, but and again, they're the designers. Sorry, Julio. They're the artists. But they are, once we start to analyze this and break these concepts down to the reasoning, and that intuition. Oh, wait, we can now go start to build agentic tools and experiment with the agentic tools. That's the world we are in today. It's just a matter of building them now.
Yeah, and I'll speak up on Julio's behalf. He is an artist. I've seen his artwork on different comic heroes and stuff. It's pretty phenomenal. He's an artist at heart.
Very much so. Very much so. It was hard, really, to scale back because I'm creative and I want to present that, and I still do. It's just at a different time. It's strategically placed. That's all.
Yeah.
If any of you, however, do encounter that, please, we're new to the process, but we're really excited about it. So if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to reach out anytime.
And there's a question in the chat from Maggie. And it says, thank you. So thank you, Maggie. It says, given the varied challenges from time constraints to reputation management, how did you prioritize which pain points to address first in your solution? So one of the things you noticed in Steve's presentation was something called a test card. It was a hypothesis test card. So you form your hypothesis and then you do the plan on how you're going to test it. And one of the things in that test card is, what are you going to be measuring to prove or disprove this hypothesis? And so for some of these experiments, it's things as simple like Steve's first experiment and our first experiment. It was things as simple as, were there themes, words, phrases that matched any of our hypotheses. So, and then how many? So for example, our one about teams, where it became clear that it was teams, our metric for the hypothesis was proven was that 60% or more of the respondents in the interviews would mention a phrase that we could directly link to a hypothesis as their largest priority, their largest barrier. In the work that WTA did for some of their experiments was how many times did they mention lack of time versus worried about my career versus I don't have enough money. So each one of the experiments has its own metric on what is proving or disproving the hypothesis. What are we measuring in order to do that?
Yeah, in my case, it became very obvious because most people were telling me I don't have time to prepare the data.
Here's that
And there's
lot.
a running joke in the space that says if you need data, you have graduate students and postdocs who will more than likely will be doing the work. And so this, not only I told you the story of the student who had to get on a bus and go validate a few pixels, but also, and this is written in a paper. There's a paper that explains how the data set was put together. And the author describes that the data set was put together by using Photoshop, by taking images and using Photoshop to extract little pieces, little segments of the image. So it was obvious that time was the main pain point. Why? Because research has cycles, funding cycles. Research has the expectation of having outcomes. And so anything that can accelerate access to data is going to help. And that's the main pain point. And so we're committed to that. And in fact, our product is going to offer a free tier, mainly geared towards researchers, and especially universities and institutes who don't have a lot of money. They can access it for free, right? But anything we can do to relieve that barrier of time, I think is going to have an impact in our customers.
Yeah, and I think there could be some initial passes you can do with kind of some AI stuff to analyze some of that, right? But there's still that human factor where you've got to kind of decipher, right? What you were saying, Susan, you got to decipher when someone said this, what does that mean? What are they saying? Because they may not use the word time, right? They just say, I'm too busy. Maybe it could be the phrase they say or whatever. There's a lot going on. There's a lot. I can't get to that, right? Different phrases, right? So I don't know. I guess it'd be a challenge to see if there's a way to automate the first couple passes of transcripts or interviews. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to see, but
I think there is. I think that's the piece that could be automated or using agents for. I think the piece that I think it's like the perfect partnership with AI, because there's lots of data analytics that we are doing manually right now that I think an agentic could do a really good, really strong first pass, right? It's probably 90% accurate. The thing where the humans in the loop has to be there is that to create that startled joy, right? That startled delight that somebody is actually listening. And maybe eventually, my avatar can do that and they won't be able to tell the difference. But
right.
But I don't know if we're there quite yet. And then I think the other place where, and Todd, you and I talked about this a bit, I think the other place would be incredibly cool would be to do, to take what the research that's being done right now about using AI and agentics to do market research and persona research, and very specifically like what are the pain points for this industry, for this kind of company, and then looking at that as another benchmark. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, and there's been some study, and this was related to Ayelet's research and
yeah.
Wevo, Nitsen's company, for marketing purposes. But it's the gray area between that and the customer discovery where, and I think, like, I can envision an agentic that, imagine you're this persona,
Right.
tell me what your pain points are, but I'm not so sure that that's I don't know if that's going to be as accurate as we as entrepreneurs
Right.
want to have that conversation with another human.
Yeah.
Like my gut says,
Yeah.
get out of the damn house, Todd. Okay.
Well, yes, there is that.
That's what my gut is telling me, but I'm
Yeah.
still thinking, wait a second, what would the architecture need to look like to just and I don't know if it's there. Okay, it's just
Yeah.
damn.
Well, and you know what else, just thinking about what you're saying is, like, it would be really cool. I mean, having done this, so many times, like, we of course see patterns right now, like, this kind of role tends to have this kind of pain point, right? This kind of role or this geography. We can even see differences in geographies sometimes, definitely differences and similarities between industries. But what if you went armed with that and there was like a discrepancy between what the agentic analysis or the AI analysis said and what you're seeing at a plant? So that could tell you don't understand the person's role, could tell you that, right? It could tell you that there's some interesting dynamic at this particular facility that you need to dig into more. I mean, it would be a whole kind of lever for you to get even deeper very fast with that customer.
Yeah, that's true. And it's funny you said startled delight. I'm looking at what Todd said there. But it's kind of true, though, that it's like comedy. Comedy is based on the element of surprise, right? They're telling a story. This is going to happen. This guy's doing this. And then it's because of the surprise part that doesn't quite fit. And you laugh and it's funny and it's comedy and it makes, how do you automate that human process? I don't know. That's the challenge.
I actually think there's a backlash to over automation. People are starting to prefer, some in-person interactions because there are certain nuances in person that you can't pick up online. And the same is true with just relying on AI to pick up on, these little clues in a transcript. So this process, we were very, I think we put a lot of importance on making sure that this process wasn't automated, that we were able to look the customers, as we were talking to them, to look them in the eyes and see their reactions. And these are customers, that work for, the top 10 Fortune 500 companies. So, they don't want to be felt. Well, you saw how they reacted when they were excited to be a part of this and felt heard. I think they almost reject the concept of maybe their thoughts and comments being just automated and interpreted.
And I didn't share this in the presentation, but there was actually one of these discovery calls that we were on, and it was when we were doing the card sorting by a feature. And so it was kind of being driven by the customer who hired us because these were his clients. And so we were going through the exercise and we were dragging stuff. And, I was kind of helping to navigate that part. The customer who hired us was kind of talking to his normal, right, customers and stuff. And at one point he stopped, he said, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen you guys have so much fun. You're actually smiling and laughing at this." Because then they start joking, right? Like, "Oh, I'd spend all my $1,000 here or there," right? And so there was this really human dynamic that I was like, they saw it, we saw it,
Mhm.
that it was kind of fun. Like this was actually a fun process that was going on, but a
Yeah.
valuable one at the same time, right? They're telling you what's most important, but it was in a fun process. So I loved it. It was great. I mean, I've never, seen anything quite like that before. So pretty amazing.
Yeah. And it looks like Maggie has a question.
Yeah. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for sharing. I'm just curious. I was just thinking about everything you just shared, and someone just said that, I mean, one of the model was trained in one region and fell in another region. And I was just asking if, I mean, how do you address potential geographic or demographic biases in your data collection process?
Yeah, that came to me from a researcher who was doing work in Africa, doing some analysis on agriculture, so the yield of certain crops, but they didn't have data to train the model for Africa. They were training it with data for North America. So what do? You need to put in place mechanisms that makes super simple and low cost for them to access data that are not just static data sets. This is the problem remote sensing has, right? If you create a data set, it's static, doesn't really evolve, and it applies to a specific area. But you need to create a mechanism to create data sets for any space, any demographic. So I can tell you what we're doing. And there are a lot of people doing something similar, but what we're going to do is allow anybody to select any region in the world, and you'll be able to get a free data set, right? Especially if you're an institution that doesn't have a big budget, you can still benefit from the solution, right? I think the bias, Maggie, is not in the data itself, it's in the resources you can put to create the data set, right? How many postdocs do you have at the university in Africa? How many master students can you put to do the data creation? That's the imbalances in how many people you can have working on creating the data set, not the data set itself. But at least we're thinking about democratizing access to the data by allowing them to choose the region, and you can access it for free.
And I wanted to add, it's not with this, but it's the same idea is what I've seen, because we did a lot of engineering and construction work in the US and Europe, which is very similar, but we also did a lot in Africa, in Kenya and South Africa and Angola even. And what we found where the bias was bad was in the experimental design, because we made such deep assumptions, because it was just, we couldn't even bring out these erroneous assumptions that we made until we gathered the wrong data and then realized that we got it wrong. And so I'll give you an example. So, concrete, integral part of a lot of construction in US and Europe. I mean, it's just a thing, right? It's super cheap. It's easy to do. And so that's just everywhere in construction. Well, these buildings that we were designing and building in this was in Nigeria, actually, well, you need sand for concrete. Well, the closest sand quarry was like 100 miles away. Well, we weren't even thinking about that. I mean, it sounds incredibly stupid to say this now, but it was us saying, well, of course there's going to be sand. I mean, why wouldn't there be sand, right? Sand is everywhere. Well, that's not true. So I think I'm with Adolfo. A lot of the bias is how we think and how we design our data collection, not the data itself. freaking geology. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm embarrassed to admit that we just kind of assumed that there was sand everywhere.
Yeah, but I'd blame the geologists. If there's no sand where you need it, it's a geologist's fault.
That's true. That's good.
I mean, it's what I learned in undergrad. So,
All right. So any other questions? And if not, just to reiterate, if you want to hear more, drop me an email or, anything that more about this, or we are going to be, you can see a lot of what we did was manual, right? So we're going to be putting some kind of product AI based and data analytics based, of course, to just make this easier because it's so valuable. So anybody interested, just let us know.
Yeah, and Roland, I wanted to wish Roland a happy birthday, but I'd love to get your yes, happy birthday, Roland. I'd love to get your thoughts
Roland.
too.
Is he still on?
Roland is here.
Right there.
Yeah, he is.
Yep.
In the background there somewhere.
Where's
I
his
see him.
face? I think we should sing to him.
Oh God.
Oh,
I'll have to edit
Just a
that out.
second before we do that, it's Adolfo's birthday week as well.
Really?
oh, oh my gosh.
Wow.
Okay, so now we got to do
Now we got to do it.
And
Todd,
we're
give
still
me an
recording.
agent that sings happy birthday, Todd. I need an agent.
We
Yes.
have several of those. I'm not making
Why
another.
are we not good enough, Adolfo? You want an agent instead?
No, of course not.
That's good. That
It
was
is
good.
Just for
easy
Todd.
from the AI musical.
Not having it. Anyway, all right, let's
Okay.
wrap.
Having it?
Let's
Oh my
continue
God.
this. Let's continue this part in overtime. So less editing for me to do later. So thank you all for coming tonight. I'm going to end the recording in a minute. Just as a little reminder, next week, a crazy person is going to be attempting to teach this community, or not teach this community, how to run large language models locally on your computers with tools like LM Studio or Olama. So if you want to run DeepSeek on your computer, if you have a fast computer, you're not going to want to miss next week. So it's going to be a little demonstration of what it is, some of the stuff about what it means, and hopefully I will do my best to not educate you on the world we currently live in. On that note, please come next week. I will see you all, and I'm going to end the recording. Please stick around for some overtime. Thanks.